Hello. So, today I'm finally going to upload a video, first of all. And today I have something a bit different than the D&D stuff last time. Today we'll be going through my deck for Magic the Gathering's Commander format, otherwise known as Elder Dragon Highlander. So, let's get this started. First off, I've got this deck sleeved in Ultra Pro's Eclipse sleeve. Now comes with now has the option to have art on it, which is I love. I got this art currently is Frank Frazetta's The Death Dealer. Now, Future Cinder here, so I have this deck box packed so tightly it was really difficult to try and get the cards out. Please ignore that. So, to start, my commander is Kadeen the Prevailer. He's a 5/4 first strike, metalcraft. Creatures you control get +3/+0 as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. For 3 and a red-white, I feel like this is perfectly fair. So, first, let's get started with the lands. So, I actually started playing Magic during the start to the Scars of Mirrodin block. So these artifacts have a bit of a special place in my heart. So, let's start off with lands. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 mountains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 plains. Then we have the Evolving Wilds. We'll be able to sacrifice this to search for any basic land, which is obviously one of the most common strategies for Commander, or at least just any card to put into a Commander deck. The Gateway Plaza, we can use that to sort of, for the most part, this is just to use for more mana, nothing particularly special. Interplanar Beacon will be using it to add colorless mana, which, considering that about 80% of this deck is colorless, this is going to be very useful. Scavenger Grounds is another colorless, but I can also, if needs be, sacrifice it to exile all cards from all graveyards, which is great if I'm playing against anybody using black mana. Survivor's Encampment. This is great because, one, I can get colorless mana, or I can tap another creature I have to get more mana of a normal color. Sandstone Bridge. This is great. It just taps for a white mana, but when it enters the battlefield, it buffs up a creature with +1/+1 and vigilance until end of turn. And Desert of the Fervent. This is mostly just a red mana, but I can cycle it for 1 and a red. So that'll allow me to rummage for certain cards. I gotta organize these, and then... So, that's the lands out of the way. Now, for Commander, you have to, your cards in that deck have to fit the same color identity or one of the colors of your commander. So, Kadeen, he is a red-white, so any colored cards have to be red or white, or both. So, I have Viashino First Blade, 1 red and white, with haste. He's a 2/2 with haste. When he enters the battlefield, he gets +2/+2 until end of turn, which is great because 3 mana for a 4/4, which will then become a 2/2. That's just value. Next is the Hobgoblin Dragoon, a 3-cost 1/2 flyer with first strike. 1 damage on a first strike isn't all that useful, but it is a flyer. Next is the Battlegate Mimic. Whenever I play a spell that's both red and white, he'll become a 4/2 and gain first strike until end of turn, which is useful because it'll just incentivize me further to use the 7 red and white cards in my deck. So, next is Double Cleave for 1 and either red or white. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn, which is going to be great for just further and further damage using Kadeen's Metalcraft ability. Next is Fire at Will. Fire at Will cast for 3 of either red or white. It deals 3 damage divided as you choose among any creatures of target attacking or blocking creatures. That's just great for an early game removal spell, because say I have a couple just like 1 or 2 health, 1 or 2 toughness creatures, and I get blocked by some massive like 5 power. If I use Fire at Will, I'd be able to, if not kill the creature outright, I'd be able to have my attacking creature trade with it in that they both die when damage resolves. Next is Ride Down. For a red and a white at instant speed, destroy target blocking creature. Creatures that were blocked by that creature, this combat gain trample until end of turn. This is great because normally whenever you were to declare someone as a blocker, even if that blocker were to die through like an instant, none of that damage would go through, even if there was no more blocking creature before the damage even resolved. But with this, that will allow that bit of damage to go through, and there are also certain ways you can build around the trample effect as well. Next is Desperate Stand. Sorcery for 1 and a white. Strive. Desperate Stand costs 1 and a white more to cast for each target beyond the first. This is great. That effect itself is already great just because it's so cheap that why not cast it for multiple targets. Any number of target creatures get +2/+0 and gain first strike and vigilance until end of turn. That is perfect for when we don't have Kadeen out just yet, because this is still going to buff our creatures a lot. And real quick side note, for those who don't know, the Commander format is special, sort of different to other formats. Normally, say playing Standard, you would have a 60-card deck filled with basic lands, and then up to 4 of any card from a recent set. In Commander, you choose 1 per. You have up to first of all you have up to 99. You have up to 100 cards in your deck if you include the Commander. The commander actually starts out in the command zone, so you don't even have to wait to draw him. Once you have the mana for him, you just slide him over, you cast him. And then once the commander were to die, he may also go back to the command zone, and you can cast him again from there for an extra 2 colorless mana every time you recast him. And then also in all the commander decks, you can only have one copy of each card other than your basic lands, being your plains, mountains, islands, forests, and swamps. And I believe wastes also count as basic lands, but I'm not sure. Next is this massive stack of artifacts. Now, I started playing during the Scars of Mirrodin block. That block was filled to the brim with artifact creatures, and recently I came into I got a wholesale bundle, and there were just tons upon tons of artifacts in that deck in that bundle from the original Mirrodin block, which is just wonderful, actually. And so that's where the majority of these cards are coming from. So, to start, we have the Iron and Gold Mirrors. They're little 1/1s for 2, 2 colorless mana, 2 of generic mana, I mean, and they each tap for either a red or a white mana, depending on which mirror. This is great if we're kind of tight on mana, if we haven't been able to draw lands for that turn. Next is the Dragon Blood. 3 generic for an artifact. For 3 of any, and you tap it, you can put a +1/+1 counter, which is great because the more buffs, the better. Next is the Galvanic Key. You may play it anytime you can cast. You could play an instant. Basically, this just has flash. In the original Mirrodin block, flash wasn't a keyword just yet, so this was a bit special and a bit wordier than necessary. It's a 2-drop artifact, and for 3 and tap, you can untap target artifact, which is great with an artifact like, say, Dragon Blood. So I can get 2 +1/+1 counters, or I can get more mana from the mirrors. Next, the Chromatic Sphere. A 1-drop artifact for 1 and tap, and you sacrifice it. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and draw a card. This is great. 1, it helps to give you sort of a mana ramp just temporarily, and it'll draw you a card. Card draw is key in Commander. Alright, next is the Granite Shard. 3-drop artifact, and then for 3 and a tap, or 1 red mana and a tap, it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. This is great for just a quick ping every now and then if you were to, say, untap it with the Galvanic Key, it's just non-stop pinging. Next is the Pyrite Spellbomb. For 1 generic mana. Okay, and then for 1 red mana, sacrifice it, and it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. For 1 generic mana and sacrifice it, you draw a card. So, easy, quick removal, or you can just use it to quickly draw a card. Next is Angel's Tomb. This is from Origins, actually, which is one of the few sets I've never actually gotten to play during my time of actually playing Magic from like 2009 to 2015. I only recently started to get back into the game anyway. I digress. So 3 generic for an artifact Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Angel's Tomb become a 3/3 white angel artifact with flying. This is great because flyers are so difficult to deal with most decks. There are very, very few creatures with reach, and there are a few more creatures with flying, of course, but they really only ever fit into a few different color identities, and even then there's so few of them. Next is the Fire Fortress Puzzle Knot for 2 generic, and when it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Great for just a quick ping. 2 and a red, and you sacrifice it, of course. It deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Not all that useful, but still, 2 damage is... I'll take what I can get, you know? Now, Glinthawk Idol. 2 generic for an artifact. Whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may have it become a 2/2 bird creature, bird artifact creature with flying until end of turn. And you can activate this ability again for a white mana instead. Next is Tormentor's Trident, a 2-drop equipment. The equipped creature gets +3/+0 and attacks each turn if able. And you equip for 3 generic. Gate Smasher. It's actually a foil Gate Smasher, but for 3 generic, Gate Smasher can be attached only to a creature with toughness 4 or greater, and the equipped creature gets +3/+0 and has trample, and equipped for 3. Next is Leonin Scimitar, a quick 1-drop, 1-equip sword equipment that gets +1/+1 to whatever it's equipped to. Here is another card of... dang it. Drop it. So, here is another card with an interesting wording for stuff. So, equipped creature, it's a 3-drop, 3-equip equipment. The equipped creature gets +3/+0 and trample, and whenever this creature deals damage, you gain that much life. So it gains +3/+0, trample, and lifelink. I'm not exactly sure when lifelink came in. If anyone feels so, inclined, let me know in the comments. Next, the Mask of Memory. It's a 2-drop artifact. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw 2 cards. If you do, discard a card from your hand, which is great, especially when it only has a 1 equip cost. The Bone Splitter. Now, this is a quick 1-drop, 1 equipment again, and this one gives +2/+0. Not all that fancy schmancy, but it gets the job done. Now, the Banshee's Blade. This one is the exact opposite. 2-drop, 2-equip. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, deals combat damage. Oh, I misread that. That makes it even better. Whenever it deals combat damage, put a charge counter on this card. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each charge counter on Banshee's Blade. Basically, if you attach that to a creature that can only that attacks each turn if able, you're golden, because this is just going to further and further buff it. And considering you can equip this by turn 4, this is going to be perfect for an early game, just non-stop beatdown in the early game. Next is the Fire Shrieker. 3-drop, 2 equip. Equipped creature has double strike, so it'll deal first strike and regular combat damage. I just realized the camera couldn't see half of the card. This is great for, once again, while Kadeen is not on the board, because this is great for while Kadeen is on the board, actually. I misread the card again. Because double strike with something that's already so buffed up on damage is just going to further ensure your victory. Next, Golem Skin Gauntlets. 1-drop, 2 equip artifact. The equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each equipment attached to it. Once again, perfect for this. This is non-stop, just power matters, with the exception of a couple different toughness-based cards. There's like one toughness-based card in this deck. Flare Husk. Phyrexian card from Mirrodin Besieged. A 1-drop, 2 equip, Living Weapon. So when this enters the battlefield, put a 0/0 black germ creature token onto the battlefield, then attach this to it, which is great because this is great because it works even if I don't have a creature on the board when I play it. And it's just a simple +1/+1 when to the equipped creature. Next, Cobbled Wings. It's a 2-drop, 1 equip that gives a creature flying. Once again, a flying creature is perfect for like any deck that's just focused on the beatdown. Because especially with the attack buff and double strike, and there's just so much value you can get out of 1 or 2 creatures with a massive quantity of enchantments. Next is Dross Scorpion, a 4-drop artifact creature, 3/1. When Dross Scorpion or another artifact creature is put into a graveyard from play, you may untap target artifact. Great, it gets me to untap different stuff, especially since all but... let me see this. All but 3 creatures in this deck, not including Kadeen, of course, are artifact creatures. And so I'll get value from that constantly. Or as long as it's on the board, but still. The Goblin War Wagon. It is a 3/3, 4-drop. It doesn't untap during your untap step, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 2. If you do, untap Goblin War Wagon. Not all that special. Same thing with this, except this one is a 6-drop 4/4 with flying, and you have to pay 4 to untap it. Just a few good old handy-dandy artifact creatures, nothing really special. Frogmite. It's a 4-drop 2/2 with affinity for artifacts, so it costs 1 less to play for each artifact you control. Affinity for artifacts is perfect in this deck because at any point I could potentially just play this for free. Next, the Goblin Replica. A 3-drop 2/2, and then for 3 and a red, sacrifice it and destroy target artifact, which is good if you're playing against some dude who has a bunch of artifacts himself, or, well, themselves. Gotta be inclusive. And then just, if something is so detrimental to your board state, you can just sacrifice him and destroy it. And since this would enter the battlefield, if you have Draw Scorpion, you can untap something. The Hematite Goblin. Golem. It's a golem, not a goblin. 4-drop, 1/4, and then for 1 and a red, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn, which is great because if you have just an overage of mana, you can just continually buff him up. Next is the Clockwork Vorak, a 5-drop 0/0 with Trample. Now, normally, that would be kind of weird because you can't deal 0 damage to people. But because the Clockwork series of creatures are very interesting in that they enter the battlefield with a bunch of +1/+1 counters on them. And then whenever they attack or block, you remove one from them. But you can also, a lot of them, you can tap to add more +1/+1 counters, which is great because you can just continually bring them around the board. And potentially, if they're left unchecked for long enough time, they won't be able to ever really have any drawback. Clockwork Condor, a 4-cost Clockwork Bird, with flying, of course. It starts out as a 3/3 and attack or block, remove a +1/+1 counter from. So he will only really stay on the board for 3 turns most of the time. But still, flying. You gotta have flyers in any deck. You gotta have at least a couple flyers. Next is the Clockwork Beetle, a 1-drop 0/0, which starts as a 2/2 and will degrade like every other Clockwork creature. Cathodian. Sounds like it just sounds like Mike Tyson saying custodian. It's a 3-drop 3/3. When Cathodian is put into a graveyard for play, add 3 colorless to your mana pool, which is great because adding that when he dies, you can just drop some massive artifact or something that you have with the affinity. Next, Gleaming Barrier, a 2-drop 0/4 defender. When it dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token. Treasure artifacts you can tap to sacrifice them and then add 1 mana of any color, which is great because treasure decks are non-stop ramp, and I gotta be honest, they're pretty much a bore to pay. They're just a bore to play around. It just ends up being so one-sided with that amount of mana, but just a single treasure token, that's great. A Mirror Golem, the 6-drop 3/4 Golem, imprint. When he comes into play, you may exile target card in a graveyard from the game. In a graveyard. So it could be from anybody's graveyard. And it has protection from each of the imprinted cards types. So, like, that would be perfect from, like, say, protection from instants. Protection from creatures would be perfect. So, Eager Construct, a 2-drop 2/2. So, it's an artifact bear. When it enters the battlefield, each player may scry 1, which is great. Just early in the game, you're gonna want to have as much knowledge on your next couple of draws as possible. So scrying is helpful. Next is the Rusted Slasher, a 4-drop 4/1, and you can sacrifice an artifact to regenerate Rusted Slasher. See, regenerate has always been an interesting mechanic just because I only ever played like right when regenerate was falling out of use. So I never really learned it. I believe it essentially like makes them indestructible for a turn. Next is Alpha Mirror, a 2-drop 2/1. First to charge, first to fight. I really feel like with the first to charge flavor text, you would think that it would have like haste or something. Next is the Mirror Adapter, a 3-drop 1/1, which doesn't sound too good, but it gets +1/+1 for each equipment attached to it. So the more and more you attach to it, the larger it's going to get, not including whatever buffs you give with the equipment. Next is another affinity for artifacts, the Mere Enforcer, a 7-drop 4/4 with affinity for artifacts. Potentially by about turn 6, if this deck all goes to plan, I can play him for free. Peace Strider, a 4-drop 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life, which is great because I don't have very much life gain in this deck. Other than that, it's mostly the Loxodon Warhammer that I'm relying on for life gain. Yeah. Next is the Ruined Servitor, a 2-drop 2/2. When it dies, each player draws a card. The Opaline Unicorn, 3-drop 1/2 that you can tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. The Wicker Witch, a 3-drop 3/1 Scarecrow. The Soldier Replica, a 3-drop 1/3 artifact creature, and for 1 and a white, you can sacrifice the Soldier Replica, and it'll deal 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. So that's good for just quick, cheap removal. Next is Field Creeper, a 2-drop 2/1 Scarecrow. The Skittering Surveyor, a 3-drop 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. That's great. That's really useful if you're, say, just tight on mana. If you haven't hit a land drop in a couple turns, getting that out and just being able to at least have a land the next turn is great. Saheeli's Silverwing, a 4-drop 2/3 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top card of target opponent's library. That's perfect. You can see what their next play might be. And for that, you can plan around. Next is the Meteor Golem, 7-drop 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls. That's great. Say they have their engine going, or if they have some massive creature buffed up, or like their commander out. Turn 7, just drop him. With the amount of mana ramp in here, actually, you can drop him turn 4, set them back another 2 or 3 turns, possibly. The Voltaic Servant, a 2-drop 1/3. At the beginning of your end step, untap target artifact. It's great because, like, a lot of these artifacts, you have to tap them or sacrifice them. This will at least fix that problem slightly. The Pardic Wanderer, a 6-drop 5/5 artifact creature with trample. This is great because I don't have much trample in this deck. The God Pharaoh's statue of good old Nikki Bolas. For a 6-drop artifact, spells your opponent cast cost 2 more to cast, and at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses 1 life. This is going to commence the end game without having to cast commence the end game, because while that's on the board, everyone's on a massive time crunch to try and either kill you off before they die from his pinging, or to destroy the artifact. There aren't all that many artifact destruction cards in Magic. About like 5% of all cards, I believe, have destroy target artifact. Boros Locket, a 3-drop artifact. I can tap to add red or a white, and for 4 of any combination of red and white, and sacrifice it, I can draw 2 cards. So, mana ramp, and if needs be, I can sacrifice it to draw a couple cards. Well, that was my Kadeen, the Prevailer, Elder Dragon Highlander deck. Thank you all for watching. Try and test this out if you want, if you have those cards available. And as always, stay nerdy, friends. Cinder out.